Forget everything you know about vampires. The capes, the castles, the seductive charm. This isn't that story. This is the Strigoi. In the villages of Romania, the real monster isn't a foreign nobleman. It may be your own father or your wife. It may be the child that was born with a different color caul. And this is a portion of the amniotic membrane sometimes found on a newborn's head at birth. The Strigoi is a corpse that rises from the grave. That much is true. But it's also a living person whose spirit leaves their body every single night to drain the life, milk, and luck from the sleeping community. In a world where your loved ones are your greatest threat, how do you defend against the dead when they're still alive? We're going to get into that in just a minute. Some of you, or many, or even all of you, might be asking yourself, what does it mean to be born with the wrong color caul? What the hell is even a caul? Well, I already told you what the caul was. This is that amniotic membrane. They call it the little cap or the shirt. It sometimes remains covering a baby's head or face at birth, and while globally considered a sign of good luck, which often indicates how a child is destined to be lucky or unable to drown, in Romanian tradition, they inverted this meaning into an omen of terror. So the caul itself wasn't the sole problem. It was the color that determined the child's cursed fate, a physical, unmistakable sign that the child carried a terrible destiny, to have their spirit leave their body at night and return as a monstrous revenant upon death. And the red color was interpreted as a stain of the devil or a sign that the child had been claimed by evil forces before leaving the womb. The red caul became a source of intense suspicion, fear, and paranoia within the community, and villagers believed that this child, even if baptized and raised properly, would eventually become a malicious force that would haunt and drain their neighbors and family. Consequently, children born with this mark were often ostracized or subjected to intense preventative rituals from the very start of their lives. And since the red caul revealed the child was destined to become a Strigoi Mort, the family and community had to take immediate action to prevent the curse from maturing. So one documented ritual involved taking the caul, grinding it up, and then feeding it to the child on the 40th day after birth. And this belief was that by re-ingesting the cursed membrane, the child would be ritually consuming the evil essence, neutralizing its power and separating them from the demonic path. And if the community failed to perform the necessary cleansing rites, or if the ritual failed, the child would grow up as a seemingly normal person, but the spirit would remain a Strigoi Viu, a living monster, until their death unleashed the full horror of the Strigoi Mort upon the village. I'll get into those specifics about the Strigoi in just a second here. So Romanian folklore is unique in that it recognizes two distinct classes of Strigoi, which are not interchangeable. You have the living Strigoi, the Strigoi Viu, which is a person born with the fate to become a vampire who lives a seemingly normal life among the community, and this individual may not even realize their own cursed status, yet their spirit poses a danger every night. Then you have Strigoi Mort, or dead Strigoi. This is the true revenant. This is the reanimated corpse that rises from the grave, driven by malice and hunger, and a person usually becomes Strigoi Mort because they were born a Strigoi Viu and died without the proper preventative rituals, or because they died an unholy death like suicide or being unbaptized. And the relationship between the two is linear. An unkilled living Strigoi almost always become a dead Strigoi upon death. This dual classification emphasizes that evil is both a curse carried in life and a physical horror unleashed in death, complicating the villagers' defense, as they had to fear both the living and the dead. The most distinctive power of the living Strigoi is the ability to engage in astral projection. And at night, while the body lies in a deep, death-like trance, the spirit of the living Strigoi leaves the corpse and travels across the land. This spirit is not merely a phantom, but a malicious force capable of interacting with and damaging the physical world. The projected spirit primarily uses its freedom to meet with other Strigoi at isolated places, such as crossroads or desolate hilltops, where they cause magical mischief. More ominously, they visit the homes of the sleeping to drain the vitality or chi from family members, causing chronic sickness and exhaustion. Villagers knew that if they found a neighbor's body lying cold, pale, and unresponsive, it was a sign the Strigoi spirit was out working evil. The body had to be treated quickly, as killing the body while the spirit was out was a sure way to destroy the threat before it became a full-fledged revenant. Unlike the popular Western image of a vampire solely obsessed with human blood, the Strigoi's primary objective is much broader. The thief of vitality, prosperity, and fertility. This makes the Strigoi a comprehensive explanation for all the forms of misfortune that plague a rural community. And this hunger manifests dramatically in cultural sabotage. The Strigoi is blamed for making cows dry by stealing their milk, for blighting crops with destructive hail and storms, and for causing livestock to fall mysteriously ill. They are essentially localized agents of chaos and economic ruin. And when they attack humans, the damage is often less a dramatic blood loss and more slow, insidious drain of life force. Victims suffer from wasting sickness, infertility, and chronic bad luck, which are signs that their physical and financial vitality has been siphoned away by the undead revenant. Romanian folklore provided very specific physical omens that marked an infant as a future Strigoi, or living Strigoi. The most common and terrifying sign was being born with a red caul, the amniotic membrane covering the head. Other identifying characteristics included being born with a tail, often interpreted as a vestigial twin, having two hearts, or being the seventh child of the same sex born to the same family. These traits meant the child was cursed from birth, destined for a terrible fate, and was treated with deep suspicion and fear by the community. These birth signs put immense pressure on the family to perform preventative rituals immediately. A child identified as a future Strigoi might be subjected to cleansing rites or even secretly marginalized, as the community understood that the failure to protect the child now meant facing a monstrous revenant later. The word Strigoi is thought to derive from the Latin term strix, which literally means screech owl, but was used in Roman mythology to describe a kind of child-eating demon or witch. And this origin is significant because it predates the Slavic upir, it's a vampire, that popularized blood drinking. The Strix of Roman lore were nocturnal. They were a bird-like spirit that would attack infants, feasting on their blood and organs. And this connection places the Strigoi in a much older tradition of evil spirits and witches that target the vulnerable rather than just being a reanimated corpse. This ancient root explains why the Strigoi is so closely associated with shape-shifting, particularly into birds and nocturnal animals, and is generally concerned with life force and vitality theft, linking it to malicious sorcery as much as to undead biology. A crucial aspect of the Strigoi legend is its focus on haunting the immediate community and family. Strigoi Mort, the dead, upon rising, do not typically travel to distant lands. They return directly to their own village, their own house, and their own family, their wife, children, or former friends. The Strigoi is driven by profound, perverse attachment to its former life. Its initial, most malicious acts are directed against the people it knows, draining their blood, stealing their luck, and causing sickness. And this detail created intense psychological trauma and paranoia within the community, as the monster they feared was the recently deceased loved one. Identifying and destroying the Strigoi meant exhuming and mutilating the body of someone they were expected to mourn, making the task emotionally and spiritually devastating. One of the more unique preventative burial rituals involved placing a scythe or sickle inside the coffin of a suspected living Strigoi, and this ritual served two distinct purposes, both aimed at keeping the malevolent spirit contained in the ground. The first purpose was defensive. The sharp edge of the scythe was meant to sever the spirit if it attempted to rise from the corpse. The second purpose was a diversionary tactic. The Strigoi, having an insatiable need for wicked activity, was provided with a job to cut the inside of the coffin, keeping it entirely busy and preventing it from having time to trouble the living. While modern vampire lore dictates driving a stake through the heart, Romanian tradition often specified a different, more symbolic location for the iron stake, the stomach or the navel. This deviation has deep roots in the myth of the living Strigoi. The navel, or stomach, was believed to be the Strigoi's spiritual point of exit. Since the living Strigoi spirit left its body through the area every night during astral projection, staking the corpse there was intended to permanently block that exit route. An iron or thick oak was used, ensuring the malevolent spirit could no longer use the physical body as a host, effectively immobilizing the revenant and forcing its evil essence to remain within the grave. The Moroi, I've already talked about this, is a related figure in Romanian folklore. While often described as a child of the Strigoi or a lesser newly created form of the Strigoi itself, the terminology varies wildly by region. The Moroi is generally considered the juvenile or weaker counterpart to the powerful Strigoi, and the Moroi's primary function is often to act as an intermediary, sometimes taking the form of animals or being involved in simpler, less catastrophic mischief than the Strigoi. But the Moroi is still often associated with blood and vitality theft and poses a significant threat. In some traditions, the Moroi who continues its evil existence eventually graduates to the status of a full-fledged ancient dead Strigoi. The existence of the Moroi meant that the community had to be vigilant against a hierarchy of undead threats and not just a single creature. Simply staking the Strigoi was often considered insufficient to guarantee its destruction, as its powerful spirit might eventually escape the stake. The only method that provided absolute assurance was a total physical dismantling and cremation. The ritual involved exhuming the body, removing the heart, cutting the heart into 3 pieces. Both the heart and the rest of the corpse then had to be burned to ashes in a great fire, often outside the village boundary. The significance of turning the body into fine ashes was that it left no material form for the spirit to reattach to, breaking the curse permanently. And in some regions, the ashes were then mixed into a drink and given to the Strigoi's victims as a curative ritual to reverse the stolen life force. The Strigoi is sometimes conflated with the Varkolaki, a Romanian equivalent of a vampire, werewolf, or dragon. And this link gave the Strigoi a cosmic dimension, suggesting that they were not merely local monsters, but agents of universal disruption. In this combined legend, the Strigoi Varkolaki was blamed for causing solar and lunar eclipses, and they were said to grow to colossal size and attempt to devour the sun or the moon entirely. This belief demonstrates that the Strigoi were considered a force of immense, heaven-reaching evil, capable of disrupting the divine order and bringing cosmic terror, which is a far greater threat than a creature that merely haunts a graveyard. As with many Eastern European undead, the Strigoi are repelled by garlic, and villagers would rub garlic on door frames, windowsills, and chimneys, and children often wore amulets of garlic around their necks as a simple effective defense. Beyond garlic, basil was another potent herbal ward. Placing basil on windowsills or near the grave was believed to keep the Strigoi at bay, but these defenses were only truly effective on specific nights of vulnerability. The Strigoi were not a constant threat, but were the most active and powerful on specific holy days, like the eve of St. Andrew's Day, November 29th, or the eve of St. George's Day, April 22nd. The night was called Sambata Strigoiler, or Strigoi Saturday. On this night, both the living Strigoi and the dead Strigoi were believed to be at their peak strength. The spirits of the living Strigoi would leave their bodies to fight each other in aerial battles or meet in malevolent groups to cast spells and havoc upon the villages. On Strigoi Saturday, the community took extreme precautions. All windows and doors were secured. All family members rubbed themselves with garlic, and often everyone would remain awake through the night to assure the spirit could not be caught unaware by the evil passing through. The Strigoi's ability to shapeshift was integral to their hunting methods. They rarely chose to attack in their hideous corpse form. Instead, they would take on the guise of nocturnal, menacing animals to gain easy access to homes and barns. The common forms are black cats, or the toad, or a wolf, or the screech owl. And these transformations allowed them to infiltrate the homestead to steal milk and vitality from livestock and sleeping humans without alarming the whole village. It's important to note the Strigoi does not transform into a bat. This animal transformation is a later invention of Western fiction, whereas the Romanian Strigoi uses animals that were already considered bad omens or local pests in the rural landscape. The circumstances of death played a huge role in the transformation into Strigoi Mort. In Romanian peasant tradition, if a person died and was not properly mourned or was not buried within the established timeline, which is about 3 days, they were at high risk of becoming a revenant. And this belief created a strong social incentive to respect the dead and perform all necessary rites, as any lapse could result in the dead person returning as a tormentor. Other causes include dying unbaptized, being a victim of witchcraft, or dying with great unresolved sin in one's soul. The ultimate irony was that the person who died on unhallowed ground and returned as a dead Strigoi would in turn cause more deaths, which multiplied the number of unhallowed corpses that could rise, creating an endless cycle of dread for the community. And as I was reading through this, a lot of you may have caught the whole milk thing. Why milk? In pre-modern Romanian village life, milk wasn't just a beverage. It was the most critical immediate source of vitality, protein, and sustenance for the family, especially for children. And losing the milk from a cow or a goat was an economic catastrophe and a direct threat to the family's survival. So when the Strigoi targeted milk, it wasn't casual theft. It was a demonic attack on the nurturing capacity of the home. So by draining the cow, the Strigoi was effectively stealing the life force of the livestock and, by extension, ensuring the children and the elderly would be weakened. So this malicious act confirms the Strigoi's goal is to inflict wasting illness on the community through the slow starvation and weakening of its most vulnerable members. In many Eastern European cultures, the ability of a woman or family to produce food like milk or butter and cheese was a direct measure of their fertility and prosperity. Witches and malevolent spirits were often accused of using magic to steal the luck or goodness from a neighbor's cow and transfer it to their own. The Strigoi takes this magical theft one step further. So by rendering a cow dry or stealing its yield, the Strigoi is directly attacking the feminine power and fertility of the household. And this reinforces the Strigoi's function as an agent of chaos, and that attacks the very foundation of the family unit and its reproductive potential, which ensures the community will shrink and weaken over time. The theft of milk is symptomatic of the Strigoi's wider motivation, economic and agricultural sabotage, and unlike the nobleman vampire who only takes human life, the peasant Strigoi attacks the material wealth of the common people. If a cow's udder suddenly shrivels, if the milk curdles unnaturally, if the sheep's wool is blighted, it's conclusive proof to the villagers that a Strigoi is active. This action makes the Strigoi a practical explanation for all forms of bad luck, crop failure, and livestock illness, and the Strigoi is the scapegoat for any misfortune that threatens the livelihood and security of the rural agricultural community. So there you go. That's all I got. Have a great day.